have cadets who would drive around the township. It is 7 p.m., so we'll call the July 26, 2021 regular meeting of the Meridian Township Planning Commission to order. First on our agenda is public remarks this evening. If any member of the public wishes to speak on a matter before the Planning Commission, you can do so at two opportunities this evening, right now and at the conclusion of the meeting. Remember that public remarks are limited to 3 minutes, and if you'd like to speak, there are some green cards over at the table as you enter the meeting here, and you can fill one of those out and hand those to our staff, and they'll make sure they make their way up to us. I do not have any green cards at the moment. I'll give everyone just a moment if they'd like to go grab one. Otherwise, we will move on. And I don't see anyone moving for the cards, so we'll go ahead and close public remarks and move on to our next agenda item, which is approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda this evening? Moved by Commissioner Cordell. Do we have a second? Seconded by Commissioner Primo. Any discussion on the agenda this evening? We did have a recommendation from staff that we, instead of putting our communications that we have at our place in the next packet, that we amend our agenda this evening to include those communications so that all the materials relating to the business on our agenda are together. I would support that. Is there any discussion on that?
So moved.
Okay. All right, I see no shaking heads, so that looks like the motion maker will accept that as a friendly amendment. We do have two communications to add.
Sentence in item 6, I think, should read at the next meeting, building, meeting, in order to answer some of the technical questions.
Yes, sir.
I don't see where that is, I'm sorry.
Last sentence before last in item 6 on page 3 of the minutes on page 5 of the packet.
The next meeting, okay.
I mean, we are building, we're building community.
All right.
That's it.
Any other discussion on the minutes? Any objections to those changes? Hearing none, all those in favor of approval of the agenda as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the motion carries. All right, so we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, plus the 2 we added earlier, so 8 communications in total, 6 in our packet previously and 2 at our place. Next up is agenda item 6, public hearings. We have none, which brings us to our unfinished business. Agenda item 7A, special use permit number 21071, Sparrow to construct a building greater than construct a building greater than 25,000 square feet in size on the north side of Jolly Road, east of Kansas Street. Mr. Schmidt, do you have anything for us this evening before we get started?
No, just briefly, staff has followed up on a couple of the items the Planning Commission had questions on at the last meeting in our cover memo, and happy to discuss any of those if you'd like. Fire Chief Hamill sends his apologies. He is on vacation this week, so he's not able to be here on his own. And my apologies for not getting that out to you until yesterday. I am still figuring out our file system, and this was in a different correspondence folder. And with that said, we have provided you both with both a resolution to recommend approval and a resolution to recommend denial, given the split nature of the discussion at the last meeting. And representatives of Sparrow are here this evening to answer any further questions you might have, and staff stands ready to answer those questions as well.
Thank you very much. With that, then we'll open up the Planning Commission discussion. I see Commissioner Bloomer.
It seems to me one of the most serious objections that people have been leveling against this development is the noise factor of sirens and ambulances. I noticed in one of the submissions from the staff that someone said that it's not that common for them to approach with sirens blazing. I'd like to know if there's further information on that point, because that's probably one of the major issues of concern.
Does a member of the applicant's team wish to respond to that, please? If you could give us your name and address for the record when you come up, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Tom Rez, Senior Vice President with Sparrow, and would it be all right if I make some brief comments, or are we to just address the questions tonight?
If you could address the question first at the very least, and then you can have an opportunity to say something.
Okay, sure, then I'll turn it over to Dr. Karen Kent Van Gorder. Dr. Kent?
Hi, I'm Dr. Karen Kent Van Gorder. I'm the Chief Medical and Quality Officer at Sparrow Health System. I'm a family doctor, practice in the area for somewhere around 28, 29 years, and live at 6215 Bridgewater Circle in the Township.
Okay.
So the question is a good one about sirens and lights, and I have some information for you about the code in the state of Michigan that regulates that. Lights and sirens are to be used with what we call level 1 out of level 1, 2, 3 priority runs. So I'm going to sound a little like an EMT here, but if you have a level 1 run, then that gets lights and sirens and transposes the traffic. You have a little GPS thing, you can turn on and off the traffic lights and so on. Now, it's apparently more common to answer a call when you're going to rescue a patient, because you obviously have less information than when you've already attended to the patient. You know a fair amount about them, their vital signs, and how needy they are, and where you're going to go. So the answer to the question for our local area, obviously it's different in Chicago or depending on your, is somewhere 10 to 15% according to a non-scientific straw poll that I did with EMTs in our level 1 trauma center based on their experience. The actual number for Meridian Township is actually not known. We don't have that database yet, although the state of Michigan is looking into getting it. So we would have that kind of information retrospectively, probably sometime in the next year. The essential thing to remember is that the community itself does not change. We will have the same number of calls as we have now. And that's where most of the lights and siren action is, going to the patient. When the EMT knows that they need a cardiac cath lab, an operating room, stabilization that requires definitive treatment that has a hospital associated with it, just like now, it will bypass everything and go to Sparrow, Maine with that patient.
Benny.
Sure, thanks.
Mr. Brez, go ahead.
All I wanted to do was just confirm that we've brought a team here tonight, and we're eager and happy to address any and all questions that you have. We know, appreciated some of the comments at the end of the last meeting that you didn't necessarily get an opportunity to do that, so we're here, and let us know what we can share.
Thank you. Commissioner Primo.
I'm still wondering if we deny the 30,000 plus square feet, will you still build an emergency facility?
Appreciate that question, and this is a significant investment for us. It's a decision that involves our entire senior leadership team and our board of directors, and so if you deny the permit, we would have to go back through that decision process to decide what we would do next.
Commissioner Cordhill.
I have a question about circulation that was discussed at the public hearing. Would you want to address that, or your facilities?
Probably our facilities team, go ahead.
Okay, it was, I recall at the public hearing that we were talking about ambulances taking Jolly Oak from Okemos Road, is that correct? I took that this afternoon with that in mind, and went around the roundabout and kind of estimated where the connection would be, because, you know, there's a gap, you know, the development is not in place. But in honesty, it seemed kind of roundabout. I would have expected someone to come off of Jolly Road directly. I mean, if they were leaving without a patient, sure, they could circulate out. I was just wondering, because to be honest, I didn't realize that there was a roundabout in there, and that you then take a 90-degree turn and probably another jog.
I think, I went back and watched the meeting again, and I think we had a little bit of confusion between talking about use of Jolly Oak and talking about use of Wood Lake and the entrance that we would create off of Wood Lake.
Okay.
We really would not expect ambulances to be using Jolly Oak and to be coming from Okemos Road onto Jolly Oak. We would expect ambulances to go from Okemos to Jolly, and I'm actually going to ask Dr. Kent to come back up and talk
Okay.
more about that.
Thank you.
So main roads are primarily used, especially if there's urgency, because
Sure.
that's the GPS has the ability to turn on and off the traffic lights,
Sure.
unlike you and I. So much quicker for them to use the main roads, and that's typically what they do.
But I guess what I'm getting after is, what are the perceived routes through streets that are, is it Wood Lake off of Jolly, or the development would face east, correct? Or south?
Yeah. Yep.
So my colleague Stacy Backegard.
Sure.
Yep.
Thank you.
Kinda.
Recognize
So,
her.
Yeah, to Tom's point, we kind of talked about Jolly Oak and Wood Lake kind of interchangeably last meeting, and the traffic study, I think Cheryl helped me out, it's really based on coming down Okemos Road, across Jolly Road, and up Wood Lake Road, or right into the Jolly Road curb cut. Nothing is based on the Jolly Oak use.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
does that
Yeah,
help
thank you.
clarify?
And you're the architect for the project?
I'm not the architect, Progressive AE
Oh, okay,
is.
but
I'm in our
facilities?
facilities department, though. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep,
So it is oriented to the south?
yep. We have entrances on the south and the east of the building. So, I don't know, do they have the site plan at their fingertips? So our curb cut right off of Jolly Road.
Okay.
You see our walk-in entrance for the emergency department, and then the primary care entrance is over on the east. That's a lot of the return patients that get familiar with the facility, and they would enter Jolly Road, up Wood Lake, and in on the east side.
So we were given elevations at the back of our packet, but it did not say like which direction they were facing.
Yeah, that top one is the south face of the building. You're looking
Okay.
northwest as you're looking at that top image.
Okay.
And the bottom image is from the northwest corner looking southeast. So the ambulance drop-off is on the north side of the building, if I've read that correctly.
Yep.
So ambulances come in to the north?
They come in they're saying they're coming in from the south or the east
Yeah.
and ending up dropping patients off at the north side of the
At the
building.
north corner? Or
Yes.
northeast corner?
Yep, that's where that screening
North-
is. And remember, this
northwest.
ambulance traffic is very low traffic per day. And that's
Sure.
why we gave the primary, the walk-in entry on the south and the primary care entrance on the east are really the more used entrances to the building.
Okay.
And for our records, you are who and what is your address?
My name is Stacy Backegard. I'm the Director of Facilities Development for Sparrow Health System, and I don't reside here. I reside in DeWitt, so.
Any other discussion? Commissioner, oh my God, Richards.
Couple of questions here. One of the issues, at least in my mind, is the lighting, which is going to be most impacted, obviously, at night. And, you know, one of the selling points of this operation is that it's a 24/7. So a couple things related to that. The ambulances coming in are still going to have some lights on at night, and they're relatively high in terms of height goes, because they got the lights around. So I think that's part, you know, of an issue, and I don't know. We did talk about, but this is more of a planning thing, that there could be trees around it. But the fact of the matter is that it's on the north side. I mean, if it was on the south side, I understand why it's not, because you want most of the traffic coming in, but to me, if this was a 7 AM to 7 PM, or, 7 AM to 9 PM, then that's less of an issue, but because it's 24/7, that's where, to me, it's, the neighbors are impacted, so more of a statement, I guess, than it is a question. Other thing I have in terms of, another point, and some of the letters that came in talked about support because it enhances level of service here. I'm still having a little bit of a question mark in my mind as to how this operation of the trauma center differs from a ready care. And I understand that there's medical doctors potentially on staff, and I guess arguably some of the ready cares have doctors and some don't, or there's times that they do or don't, but that's one thing. I guess the other thing is that in terms of looking at it strictly from Meridian Township, not so much Alden, Williamston, to the south, which this is going to serve, at what point is somebody going to, who's on the north end of the township, go somewhere other than here? I mean, you could argue maybe Mount Hope or Grand River. If you're north of there, are you going to go there, or are you going to go to McLaren or Sparrow? And again, so I can see, the location is going to serve not only Meridian Township residents for sure, it's going to serve Alden Township, Williamston, and people that are to the east. So again, I'm trying to look at this in terms of Meridian Township, and I understand that we're talking about the size of the building, but I think it's fair to say, based on Commissioner Primo's question and the answer I heard, that the building sizes is dictated by the 24-hour service. And so to me, the size of the building is really what's creating in my mind the potential for negative impact on the residents, which is my main concern as I look at this project, in trying to balance the benefit of this facility and the medical care that it's going to provide, particularly those of us, and I live not very far from here, from the location, trying to balance that against the property owners that are most affected by this. So I did have a question the last time, and I don't know that it was actually answered, and I heard it a little bit from the Chief Medical Quality Control, I think it is, person, but what types of folks are going to come here, other than, I guess, if you're late at night and it's Friday night or Saturday night and you don't want to be at Sparrow for 6 hours before you get looked at, you would potentially go here. But other than that, I mean, what kinds of things would somebody go here during the day that they wouldn't go to a ready care facility? If you can answer that, I appreciate it.
Sure, that's one of the questions I heard in there, and can address some of the others, and then Tom for the lights and size of the building questions. So I think I got them, and if I miss any, you point that out, please. It's a good question about who goes there, and actually it affects, it's patient preference, and the perception that the patient has of how sick they are and where they want to go. So even if an ambulance picks you up, the EMT will talk with you. Gee, it looks to me like you're having a heart attack, sir. I know you want to go to Sparrow Ready Care, but I want you to go to Sparrow, Maine. Or, gee, it looks like your ankle could be broken. You can't walk out of here. You're in the grocery store. Let's take you to Sparrow Emergency Department in Meridian Township so that you're close to home when you get done and your wife can meet you and take you home. So it's really all about patient preference and how sick the patient is in consultation with an EMT or in consultation with the people that are making the decision as to what are we going to do tonight about your medical care. What I like to think, to make it really simple, is if you know you need a level 1 trauma center and a hospital, you need an operating room, you need the things associated with the hospital, you're going to go to the hospital. If you think you're okay, but you probably better not wait till morning to find out, you may go to a freestanding emergency department, which Meridian Township would now have. So I think those are good ways to think about the patient side of it. You will have board-certified emergency department physicians at a freestanding emergency department. At an urgent care, you could have a moonlighting internal medicine doc, you could have a pediatrician, you could have, there are any number of, you could have a family doctor, you could have a PA. There's no rules about what might be there and what their cutoff is for their level of competence, so that you may be able to get the beginning and the end of your treatment at a freestanding emergency department, whereas if you need a CAT scan as opposed to an x-ray, you're going to wind up down at a next facility from an urgent care. So we have a much wider capability of taking care of patients at a freestanding emergency department. Additionally, we have the level 1 trauma center and all that it means at your disposal. So if it turns out you thought you had a headache, we think you're having a stroke, we can take you to Sparrow, stabilized, already having received clot-busting medications to begin the circulation to your brain again, to the Center of Excellence Stroke Center down at Sparrow. But at an urgent care, they will never be able to do those things. So you can really get stabilizing and definitive treatment at a freestanding emergency department, like the one associated with our hospital, that's much more advanced.
Can I ask you just a follow-up to that?
You bet.
So if that particular situation occurs, how does the person get from your facility to Sparrow?
By ambulance.
And whose ambulance is that?
So that's
Is that Meridian Township then?
well, there's a medical control authority that makes those kinds of decisions as to
No,
who
who's
gets
available?
what.
I'm just assuming they have an ambulance available at the
Yes, there
station.
is an ambulance available, whether it's Meridian or a private
Right.
ambulance corporation. I know that food fight is beyond me, but there's rules about it, and
Right.
they take care of that.
And I would assume they're probably going to put lights and siren on if they think somebody's going to have a stroke?
No, if they think you're having a stroke, they're actually going to treat you for the stroke at the freestanding emergency department, stabilize you, and you probably would not need lights and sirens to get to Sparrow. And that is the beauty of the freestanding emergency department, is that you have all that board certified expertise right there.
Okay.
And transfers out would be stabilized patients most likely. If you're that sick that they know you need a level 1 trauma center and operating rooms and things like that, from the time they pick you up, they're going, just like they do today, straight down
Take
to
you
Sparrow,
down.
Maine.
Okay.
Commissioner Cordell.
You talked about the case of stroke, the case of heart attacks. What kind of scenario would that, downtown or the Meridian Township facility?
Certainly, it depends when you know, right? And
When
how
you know.
when the EMTs know if the patient, it's patient preference mostly, but the EMTs have that recommendation. It's the rare person that would argue with the ambulance company or the EMT that's telling them, I really think that you need what you really need. So
So the heart attack, person considered to have a heart attack would be taken to the
Absolutely.
hospital facility?
just like they are now, because it's
Okay.
very likely you would need a cath lab or something else associated with a hospital.
Sure.
To
Okay.
take care of that. So
Okay.
Tom had an answer about the size of the building and what's in it. And it isn't the emergency department that dictates the size of the building.
Correct. Commissioner Richards, you mentioned something about the 24/7. That is not the driver of the size. The driver of the size is to have both an emergency department and a primary care family medicine practice. 24/7 freestanding emergency department could be built in 15,000 square feet.
If I remember from comments made, I think there was said about 8,000 of the 30,000, if I remember right, was going to be the primary care physicians, but somewhere in there.
A little more than that, yeah, 9
That's
to
my
10.
recollection of the size. Okay.
And so the size really is, that's what we feel is the best way to meet
Right.
the gap that we think exists in care in this area.
Yeah.
Based on what you just said, you can build an emergency center for 15,000 square feet. And then I heard 8 to 10,000 for that, if I do the math, that's less than 30,000 square feet.
Right.
There's some additional shared facilities within the building that are added
Because both of them are there, that gets you above the 25,000 then, when you're splitting everything out. The MRI is pretty substantial, the mechanical equipment room gets a whole lot bigger when you have all those things.
Okay, I get that.
Can you just think about the facilities, because I passed this on to Director Schmidt, but I don't know that there was an answer to this. Sparrow has, at least that I know of, at least 2 facilities on Grand River in Meridian Township. And so my question was, are both of those going to stay open? What's the plan for those 2 facilities?
We don't plan any change for those facilities. The hours of the urgent care, there isn't a plan for a change. Like we've said, we believe that the care that will be provided in this new facility will be incremental and complement the urgent care that's on Grand River, and then we have a Sparrow Medical Group practice in the other site.
Okay.
Commissioner McConnell.
Yeah, I'd like to go back to Commissioner Portal's questions about access to the site. And the first one I think is pretty minor. As I look at the maps, I can see the elevation development seems to have been required to do a sidewalk on the Woodlake Drive to their parking lot, and I'm just wondering if that would normally be a requirement of the site plan in this case. It seems with the apartments there and the hotel there, you would want to make sure that if somebody was trying to walk to the facility, they didn't get run over in the driveway on their way in. So it's more a design detail that maybe is a site plan issue, but the bigger one is the Kansas Road entrance that we talked about before. So I'm curious, your thinking on that at this point.
We included the Kansas Road entrance because we thought it could be beneficial to the residents on Kansas Road for people that may accidentally turn down that road if they're visiting the facility for the first time and don't know exactly where they're going. We think that once patients have been there and they're returning, they're going to realize that the entrances to the building are on the east and the south side, and so they'll seek either the Jolly Road entrance or the entrance off of Woodlake. We certainly understand and believe it's not a showstopper to have that curb cut on Kansas Road. We just didn't make it a stipulation in the zoning because, like I said, we had sort of mixed feedback that it could be beneficial. If it's not there and somebody accidentally drives down Kansas Road thinking there's an entrance, then they have to turn around in a resident's driveway and to get back out. So we were looking forward to this process to determine what the desired approach would be.
In your opinion, would some sort of like an ADA accessible entrance be useful at that point so that residents could access the facility, or pedestrians could access the facility without going down to Jolly?
Sure, that could make sense.
Commissioner Cordell.
I guess going back to the Woodlake and the access off of Jolly, will there be a monument sign, or how obvious is this going to be to get where you need to get to?
Yeah, so in part of our permission in the easement that we're writing with the adjacent property owner, besides having that curb cut, we're also going to be asking for some directional signage there. As permitted, I think that's probably going to be a detail that comes through in the site plan review process.
Can I have a follow-up question with her? Why are you exceeding the parking requirements?
So we have calculated our required parking per the ordinance's medical office parking at 5 per 1,000 or 1 to 200, however you want to do the math. Right now, and we're still tweaking some of the details in the site plan once we get to that process. But right now, we're showing 152 required and 154 provided. I know that is a different number than what is in the staff report, but I'm guessing maybe that, I think it said 135 in your report. Maybe that was based on a general office 4 per 1,000 calculation. I'm not quite sure, but we calculated on the 5 per 1,000 medical office in the township's ordinance, which is pretty standard for medical office from city to city, township to township. And what we find from a frequent user of these facilities parked at that ratio, that it's comfortable, that it's not underparked, so that people have to, if there's adjacent side streets or something, we don't want people spilling out, but then we also don't want a vacancy of concrete also. So the 5 to 1,000 is a pretty good sweet spot for this type of medical office.
Okay, thank you.
And just to follow up on that, the difference in that, this happens quite frequently.
Frequently, actually, at the initial site plan review, I'm a lot more aggressive as to what actually counts towards parking to try and get a realistic view of what the public space is. And so I probably took some space that they would consider open to the public, testing rooms or something like that should actually count towards the parking. And those are the kind of things we flesh out through the site plan review.
Sure. Just as a follow-up, and this is more of a comment and a note on the parking. If you do find yourselves with more parking spaces than are required, one thought that I had as I was, reviewing the site plan that was provided to us was, and I'm looking at this whole project through the lens of, this is a big building. It's got the possibility of a lot of use from the public, which is great. But that means big impact on the neighbors unless we take some pretty strict precautions. And I'm looking at the 2 parking areas on the northernmost section of the parking lot, northernmost and westernmost. And I'm thinking to myself, if I've got people pulling in there in the middle of the night, let's just say, with their lights on, the trees are going to help. The trees are going to do a fair amount, and there's a reason why that's what's in our ordinance. But I counted out almost exactly the difference between what was required by the ordinance and what you'd provided in those 2 parking areas. So if you end up needing to go with what the staff had provided in their cover memo, to me, that looks like a good area to make some trim. And it's especially the case because you're trying to get most of your patients to enter from the south, right? You don't want people to park up on the north side of the building because now they've got to walk all the way around to get into the southern entrance. So just my 2 cents on the parking. It's going to have an impact on the neighborhood in some small way at the very least. Commissioner Bloomer.
Continuing on the parking issue, I'm guessing, perhaps you can correct me, that the majority of the parking spaces under normal circumstances will be used either by faculty or by people going to the medical practice portion of the facility. I don't envision that much parking necessary for the emergency facility. Am I correct there?
Yeah, so if you kind of look at the site plan, we zoned the parking out. So the south is really intended for the walk-in emergency department traffic. That east, the parking closest to the east entrance, again, is intended for that primary care practice imaging, somebody coming in for an x-ray. And then that northern kind of sweep of parking from east to west is really intended for staff. So, they're there for an 8-hour shift or 10-hour shift. There's not a lot of quick in and out, whereas the patients would be here for, an hour appointment or something faster than that. So we kind of separated those 3 zones on our site plan. And can I just touch on the lighting? Because I think in Commissioner Richards, I know you were kind of making a statement with the lighting, but it kind of got grouped in with some other questions where when we get to the site plan details on there, we have gone through great lengths to look at the northern and the western property lines here, and our photometric studies right now are showing 0 foot candles for a good distance on both of those, just meaning that we're not throwing any light across our property line or even towards the property line. So we're actually continuing to even improve upon that, just to address your parking lot lighting question.
Thank you. Commissioner Trezise.
I've got a couple of off-the-wall questions based on, or to get an idea of what the timing of this is. I assume this will require a certificate of need from the state. And I'm wondering if that process has begun. And I don't recall, it's been 20 years since I worked for community health, the timeline involved in getting a certificate of need.
Actually, the services that we're planning here do not fall under the certificate of need.
I thought the emergency department would. Okay.
It's all outpatient services. Just, can I?
Yeah, if you, like I say, it's been a long time since I've been with community health.
Yeah, so the certificate of need regulations would only apply to our CT, our CAT scan imaging equipment in this facility. So
Okay.
Everything else is outpatient services. It's not governed by the HFES, Health Facilities Engineering Services, and it's not under the CON regulations.
Okay.
Commissioner Cordell.
I'm wondering how tall that screening wall is. We just won't let you walk back to your seat.
You guys can tell I'm limping. 8 feet, is that what it's?
Yeah, we were checking on these, though, it's either 7, 10, or 8 feet.
Yeah, and that's really intended, what we were talking about with the headlight turnaround. We know trees do a lot, but light's not gonna get through a masonry wall. So that's the, I think we included that image in the packet, Tim, did that
There was a
make
range
it
I was going
to them? Okay.
specify. 7 to 10 feet? I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
7
to 8.
feet, 10 inches, or 8 feet, it's
Oh.
right, I mean, that's only
Oh,
2
I
inch
see.
difference, but it's right
Where
in
that came
that
from.
neighborhood.
Okay, and it's relatively flat in that area?
That's the west.
So this is the point where I chime in and say the ordinance limits them to 6 feet. So the maximum that wall can be is 6 feet pursuant to our ordinance requirements.
Okay, I was just reading off of, which anyone could do, actually. It was the first page of the July 22nd
Yep.
memo. There are bullet points in the top third.
And do I understand that we would have the option to add conditions?
Yes.
So we could, one of those conditions is we could ask for that to be a sound wall.
Yeah, I suppose that would have to be defined, but yeah.
Yeah, a sound barrier wall.
Yeah. And just to clarify on the masonry wall, this is just for the western edge of the property, or does it curl around to the northern side as well?
We've got the 70, at least the 75-foot buffer that's kind of undeveloped in that northern portion. We did discuss with the adjacent property owners, would there be a preference for a privacy fence or a hard wall? We're not showing that detail in the site plan right now, but certainly when we get to that point in the site plan review, we could definitely look at that.
Okay. Well, to Commissioner Primo's point, we're empowered to impose conditions on this. And so it would behoove those conversations to move quickly because, we're going to be talking about that. Well, the two have happened already, frankly, because we're going to be talking about that tonight.
Yep.
Commissioner Cordell.
I'm just wanting to clarify. Are we talking about a wall that would, on the north end, but then also a wall that is associated with screening the emergency entrance?
Yeah, so on the, I'm going to say the northwest quarter-ish. Is that a good estimation, I guess, in the length? That would screen that drive. I'm not sure how well you guys can see that site plan.
So if you look on the north side of the building, they have parking
Running east-west,
Right now, there's a wall proposed to run essentially from the emergency room entrance directly to the west and then turn north. And staff has suggested that needs to at least go and cover the entire western edge of that parking bay. So it's an L right now.
Okay.
It would not go, under the current proposal, it would not go along the detention basin and then turn back east at this time. That would be a more natural buffer along the northern property line.
Okay. That's what I was having trouble sorting out.
Yes.
So when you were last here, we talked about public transit. Obviously, a building of this size is going to be well-trafficked by the public. And, you know, many of them will have cars. Some of them will come here not in their own cars, via ambulances. And at a certain point, those folks will be discharged. And so ready access to transportation for all the members of the public who use this is of interest to me. Now, I don't profess to be a CATA expert, right? I know that, you know, they are very deliberate in their deciding where to put stops and whatnot. The best that I can tell, the closest stop is going to be either at the corner of Jolly Oak and Okemos Road, or on Jolly, just to the east of Okemos Road. Has there been any discussion about, you know, negotiations with CATA in terms of having a stop or a run closer to your facility should it be approved?
So I have reached out to CATA. We have contacts there that we work with often. You know, we have a lot of bus stops around our facilities, and I haven't gotten a response yet. I reached out since our last meeting, so you know, they have processes, they evaluate, they start looking at things, but we've introed the project to them and are waiting to hear back. But I'll check back with them again to keep that conversation moving.
Okay.
A comment on that transit way, if I might. You may be aware that CATA just launched its first new fixed route in a long, long time, running from South Lansing to campus, right past McLaren.
Great. So yeah, that's something I'm interested in hearing more about, though I may not be possible is what it sounds like at this moment. The other thing was we had discussed at the last meeting whether or not there would be a sidewalk installed on the eastern side of Kansas Street as a part of the, you know, the improvement to the general quality of life in the area. Can you talk to that a little bit?
So we have studied this with our civil engineers. It's an interesting, it'd be a sidewalk running along a gravel road, but we haven't shown it in our site plan right now. It's certainly something we could continue to look at. But it would probably, unless it's a condition, it would probably come forward in the site plan review process.
Okay. Tim, I'm curious what your position is on that sidewalk on a gravel road.
You know, I think the concern for most planners is when you put in a stub of a sidewalk, how are you going to finish the sidewalk? Because it sort of is going to dump out into someone's front yard. And that's the only concern I would have, is how do we finish it? Because you're either going to turn it back to the west and put them back into the street, or it's just going to dump into the neighbor's yard, and I can't imagine they'd be too pleased about that. So that's our concern when you don't have a plan to. And I don't think there's a realistic funding opportunity to extend for the township to eventually build that sidewalk. I mean, it's such a low volume sidewalk.
When you say finish, you mean where it ends?
Yeah, where it would continue, because presumably you would continue it to the north and eventually it would connect to the sort of trail connection between the subdivisions at almost the north end of Kansas Street. And so there's a certain synergy there, but you have to build it eventually.
Right. Well, it's in the sense of planning for the future, right? There's a possibility, this is not happening, right? There's a possibility that one day Kansas might be a paved road.
Absolutely.
Right? There's a possibility that one day there might be a need for a sidewalk to connect Jolly to that trail connector that you described.
Absolutely.
And so at that point, wouldn't we have wanted there to be a sidewalk along this facility on the eastern side of that road to facilitate that?
I would agree, and I would have said the same thing about the building across the street.
I don't disagree.
So, I think we're of the same mind. It's really a question of whether or not, we would definitely want to have our engineers weigh in on that.
Yeah.
And the road department, since it is their right of way.
Right. So from my perspective, that's something that I would like to see, I think, as a condition as we move forward here, is to provide that. This obviously will go to the township board after us. They get final say on this SUP. But I think it would be worthwhile to offer that as a condition at some point as we're moving along this process, in either approving or denying this. Similarly, I think, just as long as I'm on the topic of conditions, it's my opinion that we should condition this on closing off the access to Kansas Road, the driveway access to Kansas Road. I don't particularly think that a curb cut onto Kansas is helpful to the residents. I mean, if they get far enough down the road to have to, turn around, they're well past where this curb cut would be anyway. So the reality is that they're going to be turning around in someone's driveway, whether it's there or not. The only thing that you're maybe saving is the turn out on the Jolly and then back into the facility. And I just don't think that's going to be enough people to merit that. And I think if you're coming in from the west, there's a much greater possibility that you're going to see that entrance from Kansas and then proactively turn on to Kansas to get into the facility. And I think if we're going to be encouraging any entering into this facility, it should be off of Jolly, not off of Kansas. So just my 2 cents as we're discussing what may or may not be offered as conditions in the future. Unless someone's on foot. But, in that sense, here's an opportunity if you've got a sidewalk running along Kansas Street to connect it to the front of the building on the south side, right? Right, but you don't have to fight with the ambulances, absolutely. So, anyway, that's just where I'm coming from on a couple of things there. Any further discussion? Or any other questions? So then, we come to our opportunity to make a motion and make any proposed amendments that the Planning Commission might wish on this as relating to conditions. So do we have someone who's willing to make a motion this evening?
I would resolve that we recommend denial.
Okay. Do we have a second for that motion? Supported by Commissioner Richards. Okay, so do we have any discussion on that?
The reason for my motion is since they're not clear what they will do if we deny, which tosses the ball up in the air with the possibility of the neighbors getting what they want, which is no facility. And number one, and number two, I'm not convinced that they can't put what they want in 25,000 square feet versus 30,000 square feet. So I'm not of a mind to, they have the right to build on the facility. I think 25,000 feet is adequate.
Okay. Further discussion? Commissioner McConnell.
I guess I would say it's my view that I support the project in general, and I think that the concerns that have been raised have been addressed and can be addressed with appropriate conditions.
Commissioner Trezise.
I agree with Mr. McConnell. I believe the facility is an asset to the township, and personally don't feel that a 30,000 square foot building on a lot this size is excessive in the situation. We've approved buildings in excess of 25,000 on lesser acreage, and so I would support approving it, and I will vote against the motion that's pending.
Okay. Commissioner Blumer.
I agree with the previous two comments. My original primary concern on behalf of the residents of the area was the noise factor. And I've gotten a reasonable answer to that, that satisfied that. It is not physically inconsistent with other buildings in the area. It's right on the western edge of what is otherwise a commercial zone. There are very large facilities directly across the street of a commercial nature, so that this is not physically obtrusive on the neighborhood. And frankly, I think it is an asset to the community that could end up saving lives, and I think I don't think it's obsessive to the neighborhood.
Commissioner Richards.
Yeah, my concern is the 24/7 operation. I would take exception to one of the whereases that is in the motion to deny, which I'm assuming that's what we're going to use for here, which it says, let's see, it's the 1, 2, 3, 4, 6th whereas says the project is consistent with the general standards for granting a special use permit. I would say that it's really inconsistent with, at least in my view, because a couple of the requirements talk to adverse condition in terms of impacting the surrounding properties, and at least there's an argument that they are impacted. And so I would say that I would modify the proposed now debated denial motion so that reads inconsistent instead of consistent.
And I don't have a problem with
And I think the whereas above it is also, has a similar inconsistency with the motions.
Right, correct.
that. And correcting those is fine
Yeah.
with me.
So we'll just take the knots out.
Okay. So we'll amend the motion as a friendly amendment.
Thank you.
To amend the 5th and 6th whereases to make them consistent with a motion to deny.
I guess I would, if I can just say a couple more things. I do appreciate that Sparrow has made a very strong effort to try to mitigate any of the negative impact to the residents, and I think that is speaks well for the organization. And but I think as I look at the totality of it, at least in my view, it is going to have an impact on a long-standing residential neighborhood that, and again, I'm talking about the size of the building, creating a 24/7 operation. I'm consistent with Commissioner Primo, if they can make it less than 25,000, they don't need the special use permit, and, they arguably have a right to do it. But the fact that this is part of it, the 24/7 operation, is what concerns me. If this wasn't a 24/7 operation, then I wouldn't be opposed to the project.
Sure. Commissioner Primo.
My question is, if we deny the denial, does that mean that we accept?
No.
Or do we have to then?
There'd have to be another motion.
Another motion. Thank you for that clarification.
Any other comments? So my 2 cents on the motion to recommend denial. I think that I appreciate the logic behind the motion maker's motion here, and especially with the amendments, at least to remain consistent. I think that maybe they could, maybe they couldn't build it for less than 25,000 square feet. I'll take them at their word that they need it to be this size. And I think that, we give up some of our ability to mitigate the impact on the local community if we simply recommend denial, right? Because some of the things that we may be able to ask for a building that's, 25,001 square feet, are missed if we deny this and they build it for 24,999 square feet. So I think it's an opportunity for us to, to have a positive impact on this process for the community. I think that overall, the project will be an asset to the community, as has been said by some of my colleagues. And so I'll be voting no on the motion to recommend denial this evening.
I want to make it clear that I think it's a good project. I don't have any problems with the project. I just haven't been convinced that 30,000 is a necessary number. And the arguments they made haven't convinced me. So I think that we need to be prudent when we make exceptions, and I don't think this is a prudent exception. So.
Any other discussion on this? Seeing none, we'll go on to a roll call vote. Commissioner Primo. Just to be clear for everyone, a yes vote in this case is a vote to deny the project here at 30,000 square feet.
I vote yes.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Richards.
Yes.
Commissioner Cordell.
No.
Commissioner Trezise.
No.
Commissioner McConnell.
No.
Commissioner Snyder.
No.
Commissioner Bloomer.
No.
And the chair votes no. Motion fails. Do we have any other discussion? Commissioner Bloomer.
I'd like to make a contrary motion that we approve the project.
Okay, do we have a second?
Yes.
Seconded by Commissioner Trezise. Any discussion on this matter?
Would this be the time when we discuss any conditions?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry.
Would you like to?
No, I appreciated some of the conditions you mentioned. So I just wanted to make sure that it's not a missed opportunity to discuss that. I was trying to clarify, are we just voting yes, or are we going to have a discussion about voting with conditions?
They would be amendments to the motion that's
Yes.
been prepared.
Okay.
So they could be
Incorporated.
friendly amendments, or
Gotcha.
they could be the amendments that we need to vote on.
Okay.
That'll come out in the discussion, I would imagine. So, any further discussion at this moment? Commissioner McConnell.
I'd like to offer an amendment to place a condition on the approval that pedestrian access be provided from both the east and west, and that motor vehicle access from Kansas Road not be included. Is
I
that
have no objection.
clear? Is that clear enough for, as a motion?
Any objection to that motion, to that amendment to the motion? Seeing, Commissioner Richards.
Just a clarification, the access, can we be more specific? How is that access going to be provided?
I'm happy for staff in the site review to ensure that the pedestrian access meets township code.
Okay, but you realize that Jolly Road already has a pathway there?
Right, if I need to be more specific, up Kansas Road and into the site,
Okay.
and from Woodlake westwards into the site.
Okay, so just let me see if I've understood the amendment that we're discussing here. So, pedestrian pathway north from Jolly to at least the southernmost face of the building, such that pedestrians could enter the south entrance off of Kansas. Pedestrian way from Woodlake down the eastern driveway so they can access the building from the east. And then you also had included closing the curb cut access for motor vehicles off of Kansas Road. Okay, we're all good on that understanding? Are any objections to that amendment? Seeing none, the motion will be accepted as a friendly amendment. Director Schmidt.
Just one thing I would
Be remiss if I didn't say, subject to the approval of the Ingham County Road Department.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
So ordered. Okay, any other amendments at this time?
Somebody had mentioned in terms of building the masonry wall, making sure that it also provided adequate sound barrier. I don't know if that's a thing, but it sounds great.
There is such a thing as a sound wall. You can observe those along 127 going north on both sides.
That sounded great to me.
It's basically.
Would that, does anyone know if that would be effective at a 6-foot wall?
A 6-foot wall is certainly going to have an effect on noise. I mean, it's a logarithmic change when you directly change the line of sight for a noise. But building a true sound wall like you see on 127, which absolutely is very functional, it is going to be difficult under our ordinance.
Are you referring only to the height?
Yes, I think a 6-foot wall is going to have a substantial effect on what gets on the other side of that wall.
And as a contractor and somebody who's built sound walls, I disagree that it's going to be difficult. It's going to be a challenge, but it's very doable.
Oh, no, it's certainly doable. I'm saying it's difficult under our ordinance, because our ordinance
It's going to be expensive.
explicitly limits wall height to 6 feet.
Can someone just give me the 30-second understanding of what makes a sound wall a sound wall?
It's the way it's built and the material used, and the fact that it will literally be a sound barrier, so that sound will not. In other words, in the case of a siren, it would at the very least greatly minimize the impact of that noise.
Isn't it also an irregular brick pattern to break up the reflections of the sound?
No, they're solid panels.
Is it sound panels?
Yeah.
So it's not just height, it's materials, is what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay.
I mean, that sounds a lot different from, a privacy fence or a masonry wall. And with regard to the numerous resident concerns that we've heard, it seems only fair to me to ask for something like that.
Okay. Commissioner Cordell?
I don't know, I think something like that needs to be studied further. I don't know if restricting the height will affect it, and I don't know if we want a silo appearance on the site either. I mean, definitely if you can mitigate sound, by all means, but I just wouldn't want to tie it up so that we get this kind of weird configuration on the site that no one's really terribly pleased with. I mean, does the sound wall have to be, I mean, I'm thinking of what I've seen along interstates, and they're pretty tall. I mean, they well exceed 6 feet. So would we want an 8 or 10 foot? I'm just estimating the height of what I've seen.
There's not a height requirement.
To get the same.
It doesn't have to be 10 feet.
Well, why don't could we have something like that explored during the site plan? I don't know, aesthetics, I thought that the brick wall, and, many people use it as a barrier, but for something like that to be studied more at the site, for the site plan. This is still going before the board.
Yeah. Commissioner McConnell, then Commissioner Trezise.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, since we really don't have a very good definition of what a sound wall is, that putting it into an exception really doesn't help. So I would leave it up to the site planning to attempt to mitigate sound influence on the neighborhood without trying to put a condition in there which we would not know whether it was enforced or followed.
I was going to ask staff, in that case, if an applicant wants to build a wall that exceeds the ordinance, that would be a ZBA case?
Absolutely.
Does it make sense for us to ask for the biggest wall that the ZBA will allow and kick the can to them, or is that just cheating? Is that a bad idea? Thank you. I withdraw the suggestion.
As the Planning Commission's representative on the ZBA, I agree with that.
And let me say that I just brought that up as an option, not as a requirement.
Sure, yeah. Well, I think that, Commissioner Cordell makes a good point that this is not the last time this will come up in front of, Meridian Township. And I think that, they watch our meetings and look at the minutes. And so long as our discussion on whether or not to include a sound wall and what that means is in there, I have faith that the Township Board will see that and take that into consideration when deciding finally on this matter.
It may even be something that Sparrow would want to discuss with the neighbors.
Yeah.
Sure. Sounds like they already have started that discussion.
Started it, yeah. Any other amendments to the current proposal in front of us? Current motion? Seeing none, we'll move on then to a roll call vote. And in this case, a yes vote is to approve the project with conditions as amended. Commissioner Blumer.
Yes.
Commissioner Snyder.
Yes.
Commissioner McConnell.
Yes.
Commissioner Trezise.
Yes.
Commissioner Richards.
No.
Commissioner Cordell.
Yes.
Commissioner Primo.
No.
And the chair votes yes. Motion carries. All right, and that brings us to the end of unfinished business this evening. Thank you for everyone who came to talk on this. That was much needed information, so we appreciate you coming down. Next up is agenda item 9A, the Township Board update. We'll hand things over to Director Schmidt.
Thank you very much. Couple of things. The Planning Commission may recall the Meridian Company rezoning back to I industrial that you did recommend approval for. The Township Board had an initial conversation on that at their last meeting and is moving it forward for introduction. The rezoning on Jodan that was, I will say, mildly confusing. After some discussion at the Township Board level, they understood where the Planning Commission was coming from and the applicant had gotten to, and are moving that forward as well, with an eye towards ultimately that northern piece being rezoned back. And if it's not, then we will bring forward a recommendation to rezone the whole thing back. So I think we're all on the same page there. And the board did take up the MUPUD amendment discussion and has suggested that we do need a joint Planning Commission Township Board meeting to discuss that further. And so I believe the supervisor will be reaching out to the chair to work on scheduling that. They have brought up the idea of having a joint meeting soon anyway, so this will just be one of the topics for discussion. So hopefully that will happen in the upcoming weeks and months here. Those are the major items from the Planning Commission at this point in front of the Township Board. I'd be happy to answer any questions about anything else that's floating around if you have any.
Just a sort of a housekeeping note. I see nothing has cropped onto our agenda for August 9th. And I had spoken with Director Schmidt about the possibility of not meeting as a full group on August 9th, but perhaps leaving that time available for our sign subcommittee to meet for a second time to move the ball forward on that, one of our goals for this year. I don't know if there's any thoughts or comments on that. Any discussion on that? Otherwise, we'll go ahead and plan on not having a full Planning Commission meeting on the 9th.
That may also serve as a joint meeting with the Township Board.
That is also possible, depending on
Their availability.
depending on their availability and reaching out about that, yes. So that time is available, Mr. Supervisor, if that's something you're interested in. Commissioner McConnell.
As long as we're on committees, at one point there was discussion of a future land use plan group, working group. Is that still in the works at some point down the road?
It is on the radar.
Cool.
Working through sign ordinance first, and
Sure.
we'll try to get the future land use group. I'll be completely frank with you. In my head, am kind of pushing that one back a little bit so that we can transition into next year's beginning the discussion of the comprehensive plan. And so what I think I will try and do here in the upcoming meetings is to give you guys a sense, give the Planning Commission a sense of my initial thoughts for how we attack that. Because I think every planner has their own philosophy on how these things work. I definitely have an idea of how you should look at these every 5-year updates, especially given that we spent a great deal of time and money on our 2017 update. So I have some thoughts. I have some money proposed for the budget. And so what I'll do is I'll try to lay out sort of my thinking for that, and that'll lead into then that subcommittee having a discussion potentially of how they move forward as well.
Thanks.
And that's sort of what we had anticipated this would be too, is as a ramp up to the master plan update for next year. So that's good. Any other liaison committee updates?
Corridor Improvement Authority will meet Wednesday.
All right.
And the BRA committee has not met for the past 2 months.
You will meet next month.
Yay.
Yeah, the transportation committee has not met either. I believe they meet in August, though.
The initial thought for the transportation in August was a joint meeting with the East Lansing to discuss the proposed changes to the intersection at, what is that there? Lake Lansing and Tower and something.
Yeah, that's all.
The weird intersection. I think there's a desire by both transportation commissions to get together and have a unified front as we talk with the county, because I think the county has some thoughts that are a little different than the locals do. So we're trying to coordinate that still. I have not heard back from enough of the transportation commission members to do it jointly on the 2nd. So I think we're going to try and shoot for jointly with our normal meeting with East Lansing, if that works.
Okay. And the ZBA does not have business for its meeting on Wednesday.
And you as well will have a meeting in August. So.
All right. Any other updates? Once, twice sold. All right. Takes us to our next agenda item, which is project updates. We have nothing new received or approved. And so our last agenda item is public remarks. As I mentioned before, you do have 3 minutes, and please submit a green card. I have a couple of green cards here. Peter Lupa, if you could please give us your name and address for the public record, and then your 3 minutes will begin.
Hello everyone, Peter Lupa, resident of 3575 Kansas. So I'm adjacent to the proposed project. I would like to consider the human factor. You people made the decision. I'm pleased with this decision. I think if making the facilities largely larger, but keeping this at still 1-story level means, nurse can have a lunchroom. These people serve our community, or another patient can be treated. I think I can, as a resident, deal with it. I think this doesn't have to be a zero-sum game, and I think I appreciate where you took the discussion that these people can make facility that is staff friendly and patient friendly, but the residents can benefit from it as well. So I would like to thank especially Mr. Bill McConnell, the Planning Commission. I think the condition he put in, that was music to my ears. I think that's very good condition. That makes Kansas Road friendly to pedestrians, and I think it will be, quite frankly, improvement from what it is today. But because it's horrible, people drive into the power tool facility, and it's a mix of cars and people on that road. So I would like to thank that, and I would like to to further look for what are the possible improvements. I think the sand wall is a great idea. I think it just requires a lot more input from the residents and the experts, and I think that's another solid improvement to this project. So thank you for your time, and I hope to speak next time.
Thank you. Margaret Srom Lupa?
She's my wife. She went to a restroom.
Oh.
I will be only speaking tonight.
Okay, very good. All right then, anyone else wishing to speak at public remarks? Seeing none, we'll close public remarks and move to our last agenda item, which is adjournment. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Commissioner McConnell, seconded by Commissioner Cordill. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And the meeting stands adjourned at 8:16 p.m.
I know, no, like, if it's positive.
The July 26th Planning Commission meeting just adjourned. Here's what happened during the meeting. The main topic of tonight was the approval/disapproval of a special use permit for a Sparrow emergency room number 21070. Request for the special use permit was approved by a 6-2 vote with amendments for pedestrian access as well as a sound barrier. A motion for denial was requested and then voted on and failed.
Medical stuff.
3 different Sparrow representatives were on hand to talk about the project in front of the board for nearly 45 minutes. They answered questions about parking and functionality as well as noise complaints by the residents. Tune into the next Planning Commission on July 9th, or on August 9th rather. If you have any questions, contact us at hometv.net or at 517-349-1232. I'm Logan Sella. On behalf of everyone here at Home TV, thanks for listening and have a great night.